Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Women's Health Unwrapped. I'm joined today by guest Nikki Clarke, who is an advocate for women stopping dieting, and he helps women to build a better relationship with what they eat and themselves by focusing on the importance and role of self-worth, which is very aligned to my own values and way of working. So I'm really excited to chat with Nikki and get his perspective on why so many women stay stuck in a dieting cycle, typically for many, many years, and provide you with some insights and tips to move away from obsessing over the number on the scales so that you can focus on strong health and well-being. So welcome to the podcast, Nikki. Yeah, really good. Thanks. It's great to have you. And you are the first male guest for quite a while. The last one was my husband. So there you go. Definitely, yeah. And I think this is going to be really interesting for the audience to listen to get a male perspective on dieting, weight loss, self-worth, movement. Obviously, you're a personal trainer, which will unwrap all of that. But just to get us going, I'd love to know a bit about you and your healthy lifestyle by asking what your most impactful healthy habit is at the moment.
So my own most impactful healthy habit would be, I think, sort of planning stuff on a weekly basis. I think for me, I'm someone that needs routine, needs structure. And what I find works really well for me is planning stuff into my diary on a weekly basis. I know that sounds super simple, but even from sort of fitting exercise in, I've got 2 kids,
Mm-hmm.
wife, dog, business, it's a fairly busy lifestyle. So trying to find sort of 20 minutes for myself here and there can sometimes be, a bit difficult. So at the start of the week, I will just plan out when I'm going to train as a family, or me and my wife will plan out what we're going to eat. And I think it just sort of takes away a lot of the stress, a lot of the thinking about things. And it just sort of, you can look at my diary, what am I doing today? What am I eating today? And it makes things simple.
Yeah. You and I are very aligned on that because that's one of my big habits as well. I think it helps so much. And actually, I think that leads really nicely to somewhere, we could start chatting about our topic today on, because I think where we've spoken about previously, a lot of women fall down because they go in with this huge big goal and expect to just get started and I'm going on a diet on Monday and that's it.
Yeah.
I'm changing everything overnight. But as you've just said there, and I know from what I do and how I live, building those habits and structuring them to align to the real world as well, because I think that's a piece we often miss,
Yeah.
is something that's often forgotten. So yeah, how does that kind of show up for you and the people you work with?
Yeah. I agree 100%. I think most people think that they need to be doing so much more than they actually are. And so that might be in the form of like exercising way more than is necessary, or going on a diet and restricting the calories way more than is actually necessary. And I think that's part of the diet sort of culture, or the diet industry that's around. When I first started getting into nutrition and training many years ago, a lot of the focus was, diets that were sort of like chicken and broccoli, and training ridiculous amount per week, and it was all about like discipline. You've got to do this, otherwise you're not disciplined, and that was the whole mantra. And I think a lot of that is still there somewhat, and I think it's it's sort of showcased in diets that are like 1,000 calories, or completely cutting out whole food groups, or it's just unrealistic, I think. So I think for most people, if they can start to make some small changes, and they're changes that can actually fit into their life and it's realistic, they just stand a much better chance of long-term progress.
Mm. The key there is that realistic piece, isn't it? And
Mm.
I've certainly done this myself over the years, where you make a decision that there's a goal you want to achieve when it comes to your health, and often that's around either eating healthier or being fit, or perhaps a mixture of both of those things. And because you've decided you want to do it, you just go all in. And I liken it to trying to climb Mount Everest or any other big mountain, that you think you can just get to the top right away because you've decided you want this goal to happen. But
Yeah.
in the real world, where many of us have such busy lives, and you touched on this, you've got a wife, kids, a dog, a business, we've all got other family and friends, and just the practicalities that we have to do every day to exist. How do you support people to bring that real part of their lives in,
Yeah.
and do you find people resist? to that?
I think by the time that we would start working with someone, they've probably been through the process where they've tried lots of different things up until that point. So I do think that so often, and because my content talks about this, I think when they come to work with us as a client, they sort of understand that this will be slightly different. But I guess always, if you've got someone that's been dieting for years and years, there's still that sort of thing in their brain of maybe I do need to go sort of all in. So the first process really for me would just be to say to look, let's look at what you've tried before, list out all those things, and let's look at the reasons why that hasn't worked. And often there'll be like commonalities there. So it could be that the diet was too complicated to follow. Potentially it took up too much time. Like I've obviously heard a client before they've been told to spend all Sunday cooking their meals and stuff and put it in Tupperware for the week. That's not going to work if you've got kids, right? It's not going to work if you want to spend time with friends and family at the weekend. And it could have been things like calories are super low or cutting out whole food groups. If you can look at all the things and why they didn't work, that gives you clues as to what actually might work. And it's often the complete opposite. Okay. So, an amount of food where you're not going to feel ravenously hungry, the types of food that you actually enjoy, and it sort of fits into your life from a daily perspective. You shouldn't sort of wake up each day and go, oh God, this is going to be a slog to do this today. It should just be natural.
Yeah. It's about forming those habits that become a part of who you are, because habits should be done automatic from the subconscious and not forced, which I think is where the gap is, especially around dieting and that mindset of I have to restrict, I have to as you say, like cut back on what I eat, and there's a lot of negative connotations to that approach, isn't there?
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the things that we'll do when we start working with someone, we'll map out the first sort of part of the program, the first phase. But we'll ask, look, how realistic do you think this is for you? How confident are you that you could stick to this, not just for the first month, but for 6 months or 12 months? And if they're not confident, then it's too much of a change, and we'll tweak the program. But I always give the example of January comes and people will sort of hit the gym again, right? And they'll go back to the gym. And most people will go, right, I'm going to go back to the gym every day or 5-6 times a week. And by the end of January, they're burnt out and they're not going again, right? But if you ask that person at the start of the year, how confident are you that you can do 5-6 times a week for the whole year? Like, I think the majority of people would say no, right? It's unrealistic. But if you said to them, okay, how confident are you that you could train twice per week for the whole year? Probably most people would say, yeah, I could do that. And say, cool, we'll start with that. Start with twice a week, And if you continue that for the whole week, that's over 100 training sessions. Rather than going all in for a few weeks in January and then not using your gym membership for 11 months, I think it's, most people though wouldn't take that approach because they've sort of got this thing in their head that they need to go all in. But, I think thinking more long-term is probably one of the biggest things that you can do to change that. Okay, what can I do that I can stick with for a much longer period of time?
Yeah, and that's so powerful, isn't it? Because you talk a lot about how we need to change our mindset to the approach we take and expecting to keep doing the same thing over and over and get those different results. And dieting is completely that, isn't it? It's well, this diet's going to be the one that works, or this time I will have stronger willpower because I really want to fit into that bikini on holiday or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But as you said, missing out those really important, powerful pieces of, is this something you can make a part of who you are? Is this something that fits into your real life? And I know from clients I've worked with, one in particular who had quite young children, and sleep was definitely something that needed to improve. But realistically, with a toddler who was still waking up multiple times in the night, if you push someone to focus on sleep and then they're failing, it's just going to, detract from what they're trying to do and possibly, lead to them giving up. And so instead focusing on the pillars we could that are right for where she was in her life at that point, and knowing that, yes, sleep is important and sleep will improve in the future, and you can do maybe some small things to perhaps try and make some positive changes to improve your sleep a little bit, but going all in as a big goal right now just doesn't make sense, because your kids aren't going to let you, achieve that goal. So yeah, how do you help people to shift away from that mentality of where the diet's the thing that's going to fix me? Because you talk about self-worth, and I love that because that's at the core of everything I do as well.
I think a big shift that we focus on with our clients is trying to get them to think about how they want to feel rather than a certain number on the scales. So again, classically, most diets will focus on how much weight can you lose in a set period of time, right? And often that's because most diets or challenges, they're like it's a 30-day challenge or a 4-week or a 6-week challenge, and they're all focused on quickly getting that result as fast as possible and the scale weight at the end. And often for a before and after photo for Instagram. But ultimately, like if you want to get out of that, you need to stop thinking beyond. You need to think, beyond the scale and think, how do I want to feel? So I've just literally done a coaching call with one of my clients. She's been through this whole process. She's only been in the program now for 3 weeks, and she's been in this process before of diets and felt a bit stuck. And we just said to her, look, the sole focus in the first 30 days is you want to get to the end of it thinking, I feel good. Because if you feel good, then there's no reason why you would stop, right? And so she came to me and she's poor sleep, like really low energy. She'd been having migraines for quite a while, and had been struggling to lose weight. We made some adjustments to her training, adjustments to her nutrition, all stuff that she can realistically do. And she's just at a point where migraines have gone, energy's better, sleeping better. Regardless of weight loss, she will carry on doing what we've said because she just feels so much better, And if you're in the groove then for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, the weight loss is just going to happen by itself because you're doing all the things you need to routinely.
And that's when the mindset shift happens, isn't it? Because I call it the ripple effects. You start to feel good, you want more of that.
Yeah.
And then that leads to making better choices in all those different areas of your health, whether it's going to bed a bit earlier or getting off the phone earlier than what you might usually do, or picking a different choice when you're eating out, or skipping that Saturday takeaway. It all just then comes together, and then the ripples, that's how they get bigger and bigger, because you feel better and better, don't you? And you're empowered with those choices.
For sure. And I think, the clients that we work with are typically sort of in their 40s and 50s, so they're often at a point where busier than ever, maybe like got, higher up in the career ladder, or, got their own business. They might have kids that are young or sort of grown up, maybe elderly family members that they might need to look after. Like they tend to be at a point in their life where they've got so much going on. And if you're at a point where you're feeling low energy, feeling stressed and not feeling good, it's so hard to deal with all those things. Whereas if you can make a few tweaks to your nutrition, a few tweaks to your training, that tends to lead to better sleep and all those things. Like everything else just becomes easier to deal with, right? So I think it's like that is the focus, as opposed to right, I just want to weigh less in 6 weeks. It just, I think it just works so much better.
Yeah. So we're talking about the mindset shift that needs to happen to step away from the scales and the approach to dieting. But then there is that reality to the fact a lot of women want to lose weight, myself included. I'm just about 49. I think I'll already be 49 when your episode comes out. And my placement of fat has changed with over the past 2 years as I've gone through perimenopause. So there is a reality that some women will continue to have that goal of weight loss. So how do you explain that it's not about dieting and it's about this other more whatever, balanced way you might phrase that as?
I think the main thing is to understand that by having more balance, you still can lose body fat and you still can lose weight. That's the thing. It's just that probably the approach will be more of a gentle approach that is manageable over time. For me, like I think people always, they're drawn in by what they can achieve in sort of 2 weeks or 30 days, like a 6-week program. But if you're having to go all in for that amount of time and give up aspects of your life, like for instance, we worked with a client last year who had been on a program where, I won't name the program, but she'd been on a program where she'd been done it 3 times in the space of 2 years. Okay. And it was a 6-week program, and she was told she could only eat 1,000 calories a day for the 6 weeks. She was told that she had to exercise 6 days a week for the whole time. And so obviously because of that, she lost a lot of weight because, massive restriction. But the thing that happened every single time is at the end of the 6 weeks, she felt rubbish. She had low energy. Obviously, she was a very social person. Like her and her partner, their thing was eating out at nice restaurants, and they would do that typically a couple of times a week. That was like knocked on its head for 6 weeks, which caused issues at home, and husband wanted to go out for nice meals still. So that didn't happen. And then in the 6 weeks, the weight would always go back on over a period of a few months. And so when I spoke to her, I was like, look, you can continue doing this thing and it will still have the same result, every time you do it. But it's not a quick result if after 6 weeks, it all goes back on again, right? Whereas if you think, right, if I just take 6 months or even a year to sort of learn better habits, to change my mindset, do it once, and then you never need to do it again. And she was about my age, she's just 41, I think she was. It's like, well, you potentially got like 4 decades where you don't have to think about dieting again if you just do it right once.
Mm.
You know, and I think that should be the appeal, right? It should be the appeal of not having
Yeah.
to do it again.
Yeah, when you put it like that, because I know there's a stat out there that says, in fact, that the years differ depending what you look at first on Google, but around 18 years of a woman's life is spent thinking about dieting. You know, when you put all of that together and you think about all of that time you've wasted obsessing over what you usually can't eat rather than what you can eat. And the thing is, as we now both know, and I've been on this personal journey as I've shared, like there's so much you can eat that is amazing and tasty and satisfying in all those different ways and for the needs we have as individuals when it comes to food and so on.
Yeah.
But when you diet and you're just always leaning towards that deprivation type of mindset, aren't you? And to
Yeah.
have that freedom, as you say.
Yeah.
And although I want to lose a little bit of weight, and I've spoke about this and why I wanted to chat with you is because I say I would never go on a diet again. I don't want any woman to go on a diet again. It's about building a diet for life. And there might be times in your life, like where I'm at, where you're focusing a little bit more on what you're eating to perhaps lose a little bit of weight, but not by cutting things out or depriving myself or calorie counting.
Yeah.
So I'd love to go and explore that a little bit with you, Nikki, because calories in, calories out. I mean, obviously we're not scientists or doctors, and there is lots of talk about this online, isn't there? It's a hot topic. So yeah, I'd just love to get your point of view on that really, and how we can help people to move away from that calorie counting mindset.
So I think the first thing to understand is that, the amount of food that we take in will dictate what happens with our body over time, right? If we continue to take in too many calories, then over time we put on weight, and if we are in a calorie deficit, then we will lose weight. So that doesn't change. And I think the thing that most people don't have is an understanding of what that amount looks like for them. So they think classically, right? If I am trying to lose weight and if I'm in a deficit, it needs to be a silly low amount, right? Whereas actually most people can eat a lot more food, and most people should eat a lot more food, to lose weight. And I think what's been lost in this whole sort of talk about it really is that also what's really important is the quality of food as well.
Yeah.
I speak from experience myself. Like I want to feel good. I don't just want to feel like I've lost a load of weight, right? And my clients are the same. And if you are in a place where typically in 40s and 50s, that would mean perimenopause or menopause, again, the quality of food, it can really dictate the symptoms that you face or the sort of severity of the symptoms as well. So calories are important in terms of the amount of food that you eat. That will dictate whether you lose weight or not. But ultimately as well, focusing on getting good quality nutrition, good quality amounts of protein and fruits and vegetables and fiber should be a big part of it as well. And I think that's lost sometimes in the whole sort of debates that swirl around online. We've lost thinking about just quality food. I think it's a lot of the time people just don't think about it. They just think about calories, and there's so much more to it than that.
Yeah, it's so nuanced, isn't it? And there's lots of examples I'm sure we can both share. I've worked with clients who eat very little and are overweight and are very unhealthy, things like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, but they'll come to me and say, but I don't have breakfast, I don't have lunch, but then they maybe have 5, I dare say even more takeaways a week, which when I started this, I was really amazed that these people are actually out there and this is their life most days and weeks, living on not just a diet made up of predominantly ultra processed foods, but actually of takeaway kinds of foods. And when you look, they aren't eating really very much real protein at all. They're not having good fats. They're avoiding carbs, but then having the bad kind of carbs, if you like, in takeaways like pizzas, and wraps and things like that, and fish and chips and so on. And the diet is so poor quality. And as you say, that quality piece, especially for women, I mean, it's important for every one of us, but when we are starting to transition through midlife and menopause, our hormones can be really imbalanced because of the quality of or lack of quality of nutrition, can't they? So that's something that we really need, and that I'm trying to help women shift towards, because in my case, I have a fantastic diet. I have such a diverse range of plants. I'm getting lots of, vitamins and nutrients and polyphenols and fiber and all of the stuff that feeds the gut microbiome. And then I've got a lot of healthy proteins and the healthy fats and so on. I drink a lot of water. And of course, like most people, I like the odd sweet treat now and again and different things. But yeah, you don't know what's going on underneath the bonnet, so to speak. And I think it's not a case of throwing the towel in to say, well, now I'm menopausal, I should just give up on trying to lose weight or caring about how I look. I think it's more that acceptance and compassion towards yourself, that there's a lot going on that is very complex, isn't it? And women
Yeah,
more so than men.
for sure. It's definitely more complex in women than men. Like us men have it fairly easy, to be honest. I think the thing around menopause is and perimenopause is that I think there's this overriding message that if you're experiencing poor symptoms or if you're experiencing weight gain, that's just something you've got to accept. And I just don't believe that. I don't think it's something you need to accept. I think there's lots you can do, right? And I think, I've heard of anecdotally clients going to doctors feeling a certain way, certain symptoms. My wife as well, feeling certain symptoms, going to the doctors, just getting completely dismissed. It is what it is. Get on with it, or being offered medication that was just not aligned with, what the actual symptoms they were having. Obviously being told that you can't go on HRT, but they've been given sort of, other things to sort of perk them up, and it's prescription stuff. And it's like, well, rather than that, should we just look at it a different way and just support women as best as we can, right? And ensure that they're trying to eat in the right way, show them how to do that, show them how to train well, sleep as much as possible, as well as possible, and just do all the things that are in your control. I think it's like, don't accept the average message that you're getting. Just if you want to be above that, if you want to thrive, do everything that's in your power. There's lots of things you can still do to help with this.
Totally. And I think part of the challenge we have is it's like two sides of the story. It's great that we've got a lot of media attention on menopause and lots of celebrities involved in the space and the conversation. But then on the flip side, you've got what they're putting out because of how they look. That makes a lot of women feel like they are a lost cause, so to speak. It's like, well, I'm never going to look like that. And I had this with my own GP, who actually said to me in the middle of an appointment related to menopause, what do you think about Davina? And all this menopause stuff. And she knew that I was a health coach, and she was saying, we call it the Davina effect, because everyone's coming in just wanting HRT, thinking it's going to magically make them as skinny as Davina, and it sounded like there was a lot of kind of annoyance and frustration there. And I have heard this wider as well, but she literally asked me about this, and so I think a lot of women have this, comparison piece that they look at these celebrities and influencers and think, well, it's easy for them, or they have the money, or whatever it might be, and I'm not like them, and so what's the point? And I'll just, as you say, accept where I'm at, but that doesn't need to be how it is.
No, that's the thing, and I think it's the start of it. I think comes from having that mindset of not wanting to accept it. And the clients that we've worked with that we coach through this, they typically don't want it, right? They're like, I don't want to spend the next how many years feeling like I've got low energy, feeling like my brain's all over the place. Like they want to be in a place where they're dealing with it, or at least feel as in much control of the situation as they can be. Because I think if that, we've had clients say, right, I'm going to make these changes to my nutrition, I'm going to make sure I'm doing this lot of exercise. If after that, then I still feel some symptoms, then at least I know I'm doing everything within my power to try and help this. And HRT is a conversation that this is it's a very personal thing, and decisions should be made. There's no right or wrong with it, right? And there's a decision that should be made based on person to person. But there are always things that you can try, I think. And I think that the whole message of women just need to get on with it or just accept it is just, quite frankly, BS.
Yeah, I'm pleased to hear you think that. And
Yeah,
and so you blend together diet and exercise,
yeah,
and there's a thankfully, again, a very strong, clear message coming out about how important it is for all of us to move our bodies. You know, we are facing this crisis, if you like, because of how sedentary the younger generation, especially, are. And that's something else that I talk about and focus on. But when it comes to midlife women, many of whom haven't regularly exercised or have only ever exercised as a way to try and achieve a weight loss goal. Like,
yeah,
how do we empower women to know what they're going to get back from exercising? And I've seen some of what you focus on, which is that strength training and being strong and
yeah,
really knowing that what you're doing is investing in your future self.
yeah. Do you know what I think? When you're early on in life, you can probably get away with not exercising, and it not doesn't really affect your life too much. You know, in your 20s and 30s, you know, you've probably got a certain amount of movement available to you. But the older we get,
Mm.
the more that movement diminishes, and there is definitely a tipping point at which point, you know, you're more likely to injure yourself, fall over, trip over, etc. And then, you know, that then is then a sharper decline into sort of poor health. You know, I think about my gran. My gran was a really great example of this. She never trained, never exercised, wasn't massively overweight or anything, but just wasn't a strong lady. And she just basically got to the point where she kept falling over, and it was sort of a few hospital visits, and then sort of spent the last sort of 10 years of her life, you know, pretty much wheelchair bound, couldn't do a lot for herself. And my thing for me is that like the reason that I train now is because I want to try and avoid that as much as possible. You know, who
Mhm.
knows what's around the corner? But again, it's trying to do as much as I can to control that. You know, I don't want to. Well, I want to be around as long as possible, and I don't want to be a burden on my kids when I'm 80 years old. You know, um, and I want to try and control that as much as I can.
Mm. Yeah, totally. I'm the same. My mum had really, yeah, just a very normal lifestyle. And I think for that generation, going to the gym, exercise, and certainly for females was just not part of the story. You didn't do it.
Yeah,
And she, yeah, had a lot of physical health problems and became immobile. And that sadly led to lots of health problems, which then led to early death. But it's funny, actually, earlier today, I was listening to um, a doctor, I can't remember her name, I haven't come across her before, on Stephen Bartlett's new podcast episode. And she said something which is one of the problems I constantly come back to as a business owner, trying to work out how to sell what I offer, is that proactively protecting your health isn't something that people want to buy into.
mm.
You know, and so that piece that you've just said is totally where I am, in that I've seen the cost of not taking care of yourself in my family, and I've experienced that through my own health journey. And so I want to invest in the future me. I want to be 80 and still have choice over where I travel, how I travel, who I spend time with, where I go, you know, that I can enjoy the years I've got. And I know that for women, they spend more of their lives than men in poor health or with disability. And it's around kind of 22, 24 years of their life in poor to ill health, which is just
Yeah,
astounding. And we're not taught this obviously at school. And we don't know this. And I think the way the world is, it's very much about living fast, living now, like, you know, work hard, play hard, just don't worry about the future. That's boring.
mm.
But there is a reality to that, is there? So how do we switch people? And like, so where's that tipping point for the kind of clients you work with that has made them go, I'm going to pay and work with Nikki and his team because I'm fed up with dieting and this actually is now about the future me?
I think you said, like what you said there is a tipping point. That's the thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
if you get to that point, like where you've been dieting for 10, 20 years, you know, at some point there's got to be a point where I can't do this anymore. I need to get out of this cycle. You know, if a client comes to me and they're 40 years old, they might think, well, I'm maybe halfway through this thing right now. So, you know, let's not spend the next 40 years dieting like I did the first 40 or first
Mm-hmm.
20 or whatever. So yeah, I think one of the things that we work with a lot on clients on that is, just because that they're taking care of their health and exercise and eating well doesn't mean that your life has to go on hold. And actually, we would encourage them to still do everything else they want in life. Just get on with their life as well. So we encourage them to eat out with friends, and we encourage them to do things, activities that they enjoy. Which again, I think on most diets, if it's like a 6-week plan or something like like a blitz for 4 weeks, you give up all that stuff normally, right? And I'd say, well, look, don't give that stuff up. Still go to concerts and still do things that you enjoy, but just do it in a way where you're eating nice food, you're training, and occasionally, if you want a beer, if you want to have a bit of chocolate, then do that as well. Like it doesn't have to be all or nothing. I think if you get that sort of middle ground, you can get on with your life. Like that's a big part of what we do with our clients. Is like, I sort of thought we rebranded our company about a year ago we called our company now Your Best You, because I wanted it to be about just living your best life for how many years we've got on this planet, right? And a big part of that is enjoyment every single day, like the daily bits of joy that we get. Don't stop doing those things, but exercise can have a massive effect on that, and so too does nutrition.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I feel like we need some kind of festival event, Nikki, where we're literally shouting through a megaphone on the stage for this, because I think a lot of people through the pandemic started to think about this kind of thing when we saw how fragile life was in many ways. But I feel as though 5 years on, that's gone. I think we've forgotten some of the pain of what is possible in our world. And this is a whole other conversation, but obviously technology and just culture and so on is, I think, leading to people wanting that instant gratification so much. And it really saddens me when I'm amongst either friends or other groups of women, in their 50s, even older, 60s, who always talk about dieting and that they just need to lose weight. And the way they talk to themselves is awful, And I was this person in the past, I'm so fat, I look awful. As soon as you take a photo, oh, delete that, I'm too fat. I don't want anyone to say that, that they're living with that. And as you say, there's a point where that life just isn't going to be there anymore. So let's embrace while we have the opportunity to live. So on that note, I'd love to wrap up with you giving what you think would be 3 simple steps someone can take to embrace that way of thinking, to look forward to the rest of their life, knowing that they can be strong and healthy and enjoy life the way they want to.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is to get clear on what it is you want. Okay, have a strong vision of the goals that you have and why you want to achieve them. I think just saying that you want to lose weight isn't enough. Like, why is it you want to lose weight? If you want to lose weight, that's absolutely fine. But why is it you want to do it? And for most people, it would want to be that they feel like they've got more energy. They feel like better in photos, if you just said, like, feel like they've got more confidence. There's a whole slew of reasons. But why is it? Like, it's almost really good to just imagine what future you looks like. If I could say to you that, where do you want to be a year from now? What does she look like? What are the things she's doing on a day-to-day basis? Get really granular on that. I'm sure it would be things like feeling my best in my clothes, waking up feeling like I've got lots of energy, being able to go out for a meal and not stress or feel guilty because I've had a dessert, like all those things. And then start working towards that. And the second thing would be the way you work towards that is by small daily change. Okay. You're not going to get to that point in a week, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. Think about that long-term vision. Think about the small things that you need to do each day and just do them. Okay. And if you have the odd off day, if you have a day where you plan to do, I don't know, X amount of steps or something, and you don't quite do it, that's okay. You just get back on track the next day, right? And the next thing would be, the third thing is, once you're going through this change and you're trying to do making the changes that you need to nutritionally and training wise, just evaluate it once a month. Just evaluate where you're at. Have you moved enough in the direction that you want? If yes, cool. If not, remove emotion from it. Don't think, oh my God, I'm so bad, I didn't do this, I'm not where I want to be. Just remove emotion and say, look, logically, why am I not as far ahead as I want to be? And a lot of that time, it might be sort of life stuff that you just can't control. You might have had lots of work going on work-wise and you've not quite been able to train as much, but you still did a bit. It might be, you tried to tweak some stuff nutritionally and you weren't quite ready for those changes yet. That's fine. Work out what progress you have made. Look at that and think, do you know what? That actually is quite a lot, even though it's not where I want to be. It's still quite a lot of progress. Now, what do I need to do in the next month to keep moving me in the right direction? I think so many people just give up when they're not where they want to be. They'll think, I should have lost this amount in this amount of time. And when they're not there, they just think, I had a lady the other day messaged me on Facebook. And she said, I've been following this diet. I've only lost a couple of pounds. I'm really annoyed. What can I do? Okay, so I got a bit more information about what the diet was. How long have you been doing this? 10 days. Right, okay, it's been 10 days. Okay, maybe just give yourself a bit more time. You know, like, don't think about the short term. Think about, right, if I just keep chipping away at this, where could I be in a year? All right. I think most people just really overestimate what they can achieve in a short space of time, but really underestimate. Like, you can change your life in 6 to 12 months. Absolutely. You know, so focus on what needs to happen in those 6 to 12 months and just go and do it.
Oh, that's brilliant advice. And as I said all of the way through the conversation, totally aligned with my values on this. And I think it does come back to that mindset we've got about, we want something, we want it now. And sadly, we're seeing lots of women choosing to take injectable weight loss drugs. I've just done a podcast episode with someone on that, which, of course, in the healthcare system have a role to play. But women are taking them to lose a small amount of weight in a short amount of time without any of the right support. They're getting them kind of on the grey market, shall we say, because they're so desperate for that quick fix, as you said, or joining that 4-week boot camp, or that 6-week bikini body boot camp, and then think, well, I'll go back to normal life. So as you said, this is not about falling off the wagon or having to do it for a certain amount of time. This is finding a way to build it into who you are and in the real world that we all live in. So I love all of those steps that you've shared. Thank you.
No worries.
So just to kind of let people know, where is the best place if they wanted to find out more about you and take a look at the programs that you provide?
So the best place would just be to check out my Instagram first. That's obviously at Nikki Clarke Coaching. I would just advise having a look at that first. Having a little scroll, looking at some of the videos, see if you think it sort of aligns with you. I've also got a podcast called the Your Best You podcast, which, if you want obviously a bit more in depth than a 30-second reel, that'll be the next best place. And then outside of that, like, if you feel like you've got a question that you want to ask, please just reach out to me on Instagram. I'm always happy to answer any questions that people have. No such thing as a silly question. If it's anything you need to know about training or nutrition or menopause or anything like that, just reach out and I'll try and give the best advice that I can.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'll pop those links into the notes. And I do want to just add, because what Nikki and I do is very similar, but obviously we're different people, but we have a different way of working with people. And sometimes people come to me who want more structure than what I provide. I don't provide meal plans. I don't give structured workouts. I'm a PT as well, but I just incorporate that more from a coaching element and ad hoc if people need it. But if you're looking for more of that structure and support and guidance, like Nikki said, check out what he provides, because sometimes, depending on how you are and what your goals are, that's the kind of person you need to work with and way of working that can help you, depending on where you are, and it's always individual, your goals, isn't it? So hopefully, I'm bringing lots of different guests, lots of choice of things to help you in whatever way you want to improve your health and well-being.
Amazing.
So fantastic. It's been great to chat, and I've loved getting your point of view, and it's always great to know that there are other people out there helping us all to live longer, stronger lives.
Amazing. Well, thanks for having me on. Been a blast.
Yeah, thanks, Nikki.